You're listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. You can hear the show live Monday through Friday from 9 to 11 on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN and streaming at accesswdun.com. You can find all things Martha Zoller at marthazoller.com. Matthew Boedy is with us today, and he is involved in an event that's coming here March 18th through the 20th at Free Chapel. It's called the Faith Forward Pastor Summit. It's put on by Turning Point USA, and we're going to find out more about it today. Matthew, thanks for being with me today.
Oh, happy to be here.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about you first, and then your involvement in this event.
Well, I'm a professor at the University of North Georgia, and I'm written about Charlie Kirk and Turning Point for a while, and I have a new book about their plans for Christian nationalism. I'm not necessarily involved with the event. I'm hoping to attend, but it is put on by Turning Point Faith there at Jensen Franklin's mega church here in Gainesville. From my understanding, it's I think their fourth or fifth pastor summit they've had since they started Turning Point Faith. And Turning Point Faith is part of the large Turning Point organizations. They have several different arms now, and they've put Charlie Kirk's millions of dollars into 7 different areas of cultural influence and trying to Christianize those areas.
Yeah, and so tell me about this book that you're writing, and when is it coming out?
Well, the book is available for pre-order now. It's through Westminster John Knox Press. The title of it is called The 7 Mountains Mandate, which is a strategy by Christian nationalism, Christian nationalists, and people like Charlie Kirk. Specifically, it's the 7 areas: media, entertainment, education, government, all those things, and religion, of course, is one of them. And all those areas that Turning Point is putting their money into to try to change the culture or change what they want the culture to be. The book lays out in each chapter what Charlie Kirk and Turning Point have done and what they're trying to do. That 7 Mountains Mandate comes from one of the speakers at the conference or the Pastor Summit next week, Lance Wallnow. He's one of the faces of that movement and has said that Charlie Kirk is one of his heirs. So I'm sure that Charlie Kirk will address some of those areas in his words to the pastors, even though it's a religious event. And all the pastors that are coming, I'm sure, will be eager to agree with that 7 Mountains Mandate.
Well, and the term Christian nationalism, though, I think it's a kind of politically charged term, right? Where,
totally, yeah.
Because faith has been a part of this country from its founding, okay? And people practicing their faith and being able to practice their faith openly. I think one of the greatest things about this country is the fact that we can openly practice our faith. When you look about what's happening around the world in Syria, and even in Ukraine, where they're suppressing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. There's a lot of real suppression of faith going on around this world, and we have a pretty open and free country as far as religionists go. So tell me what you mean when you say Christian nationalism.
Well, I do want to make a difference between religious liberty and religious freedom, which is a concept that many Baptists have taken up, and that means religious freedom for all. My definition of Christian nationalism is what people like Charlie Kirk say. They want to make or remake America into a Christian nation, and that doesn't just mean ruled by Christians or people that voted into office. But it also means that the 7 areas of culture, they want to have a Christian power over them. And the Bible that I read doesn't speak about power of Christians over people. And so I do want to make a difference between religious liberty and religious freedom and Christian nationalism. I do not think those are the same thing. So when you talk about faith being part of our American history, that is certainly true. And we have a lot of freedoms to speak about Christianity and Jesus. But that's different than, for me, what Christian nationalism is.
And I do hear you on that. And I think that as a Christian, I think a lot of us, and especially I have felt it, where you talk about these 7, I think you call them the 7 pillars, right? There are these, a lot of us feel that there have been cultural shifts in all those areas that have worked against Christians over the last, 50 years. And so there are people out there. I do think there's kind of a fourth great awakening happening in this country right now, where people are reconnecting with their faith for the first time in, generations. More men are going to church again. Very common in the Christian church and a lot of churches. The women take the kids to church, and a lot of times the men don't come. But you're seeing more men go to church. You're seeing more men talk about their role as being husbands and fathers more in a more vocal way. You look at Harrison Butker or somebody like him. So I do think there is this change going on. I don't think it's all bad, though. I think a lot of it is good.
Oh, no, I agree with all that you said there. I think that, the fourth great awakening is a phrase that Charlie Kirk has used. He's interested in, evangelism. I think that the difference of Christian nationalism is that power component, is influencing, changing into domination or dominionism. I think that making these 7 areas into Christian, not just to influence them or to convert people with, they're not interested in a mass conversion. They don't see that as part of the future. I think though they're interested in downplaying and putting aside and taking away freedoms of other religions. I think that's what Christian nationalism is for. I think that's one of their goals. And so I think that the Pastor Summit at Free Chapel will have many different views on religion, but I think that many people there will agree with Charlie Kirk when he calls himself a Christian, but he also calls himself a nationalist, and I just happen to use the phrase Christian nationalism because it comes easy to say.
Yeah, and Matthew, I'm not arguing with you, except I think that as a Christian, I feel like a lot of times we get, if I'm a Bible-believing, born-again Christian, which I am, because I feel that way doesn't make me a Christian nationalist. And so, but a lot of media, I'm not saying you're doing it, but a lot of media wants to lump all evangelical Christians into this group of Christian nationalists. And I got to tell you, I have not personally met anyone that has said to me a Christian nationalist credo. I've heard a lot of people that are concerned about freedom of religion and religious liberty in this country, though.
Okay. No, yeah. I mean, the phrase Christian nationalism is not used by people who might, we label them Christian nationalism. Again, Charlie Kirk does not describe himself as that. But I do think it's a good term to describe some of the things that they're doing. And I do think there are conservative evangelicals that are not in step with Charlie Kirk and the Seven Mountains Mandate. It is not a majority of conservative evangelicals. The church I go to, not involved in that. So, there's a total difference between the groups. And I think that one of the ways to think about it in a difference is the Christian nationalism group is interested in this, not just political power, but this power over others. And I don't see that in the scriptures that I read.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's when I think about, radical Christians, Christian nationalists, I think about people like the Westboro Baptist Church. I think about people in the Muslim faith. I think about people like the radical imams that you see preaching death to America in this country, in the mosques. You have radical forces of religion. We've had them since the beginning of time. I mean, really. But they get more. The problem is, I think, and maybe problem is the wrong word, but they get more traction because of social media and because of video and because of things like that, because we live in this instantaneous world. 100 years ago, you might have some crazy person preaching something somewhere, but no one was going to hear it but the few people that were around them. Or maybe if they saw it in a newspaper, it'd be 6 weeks later, right? So we have this instantaneous world that we live in that makes people who are on the fringe look bigger than they are because of social media and other things like that.
Oh, yeah, totally. And that's why I think education is really important and promoting a public common good education for everybody, not just for private schools, not just for people with vouchers. And I think that part of the growth of Turning Point in Charlie Kirk has been the social media you just described. One of their goals is to use their media influence and to create content and to put things out there to promote their different ideas. And I think that education helps us take a step back, take a step away from that and see the bigger picture, and this is what my book is hoping to try to do.
Well, I look forward to it. It is available for pre-order now. Tell folks the name of it again.
It's called the Seven Mountains Mandate.
Great. Well, listen, appreciate you being with us today, and good luck. We talked to Doug Collins. VA Secretary Doug Collins is with us today, and Doug is a graduate of North Hall High School. He became a lawyer. He was a pastor. He ran for Congress and won and served us well in Congress. He also worked with America First, and he's just a good guy. He served in the military for a very long time, and I'm glad to call him my friend. Doug Collins, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, Martha, it's always good to be home.
It is always good to be home, isn't it? Listen.
Yes, it is.
Look, I know you're drinking from a fire hose right now because there's a lot going on at the VA. And you know, my dad was a POW in World War II, and he used VA services. And some of the same problems you have today, he had in the 80s when he was using those services. So you've got a big job in front of you. What are I love the top three things. What are the top three things you're working on right now?
Well, Martha, yeah, you've got it completely right, and I look forward to digging into it past this. But the really top three is making sure, number one, what I've stated is that the Veterans Back, is the main focus of the VA. It's not about the VA itself and our structure. It's about, are we taking care of our veterans, not only in health care and benefits? We're doing that in a timely fashion. It's also making sure that we're getting the most updated information we can, health records, the things that need to happen. And then I guess it's not a third. It's just sort of there, but it's the one that's overriding for me. It's the issues of homelessness and suicide, which are prevalent, and that we have spent a lot of money at the VA, but are not making the progress that we need to make.
I'm so glad you brought up that one. I'm sure the guy that started Tunnels to Towers, and they're working really hard to do work on veterans' homelessness. Is it important for the VA to be able to partner with an organization like that to be able to make outreach to veterans, or is there something internally you'll be doing?
No, look, this is the good part about it. And Martha, we've known each other for a long time, and you've known me a while. I ask questions. And so it's, as much as it is for me drinking from a fire hose and making sure we're getting everything, the staff and senior staff up here is getting used to me answering questions about things that and it's funny, especially for the career people who've been doing this for a long time. It's like, why are you asking that question? Well, because, and I'll use an example here on homelessness, we have $3 billion in the budget. And we've had that in the budget for almost 5 to 6 years now. And the number has come down a little bit, but we're still at 40,000 in homelessness. And, you and I could find, 200 acres almost and build 40,000 homes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is. So I'm saying, okay, this is what we've been doing. We're not making a lot of change here. Why aren't we asking others in this field? And I think this is going to be a little bit different in my term. I'm a member of the American Legion, been a member of the VFW and others. And, all our VSOs, great folks, I love them to death. But also there are others who have came on the scene, especially, as you well know, with our GWAT veterans, these global war on terrorism, that younger veterans who are more attracted to other organizations that are doing some really good work. So we're going to, look, if you give me a good answer and give me something we can partner with, we're going to take a look at it.
And Omar Bradley, of course, started the VA and the health system for that. And his idea was to helping the warfighter coming back, the guy that had problems related to combat. And then it was expanded to be everything. And, when you try to be everything to everybody, you're going to let some people down. So do we need to work harder on what the mission of the VA is, especially the healthcare side?
Yes. That's a given. I mean, let me just give you a few statistics for my home folks, and just to let you know why. Because right now, Martha, you're seeing you probably more than others because you're attuned to everything as far as the political side of this. Everybody's saying, "Oh my God, Doug is we're cutting at the VA. It's going to be terrible." Well, let me just reiterate some facts. Since 2015, the VA healthcare side has been on the high risk list for the GAO since 2015, high risk list, which means that programs and operations are serious, have serious vulnerabilities for fraud, waste, and abuse in management and transformation. Also, overseeing patient safety, access to care, and hiring critical staff all have been flagged for high risk. So what we're looking at here is we're going at this from a perspective of, what has Congress done? And we're finding stuff in where VA has frankly not followed Congress's lead in community care access, and others, where they've just basically thumbed their nose at Congress. We're going back and saying the law says that we're going to have VA support for our, like the CBOC there in Oakwood. We got the medical centers down in Decatur, Augusta, Dublin, others. But we've also have a lot of community care that's going on, especially in Northeast Georgia. And unfortunately, it's harder and harder to get there to it. And so we're looking at this from the perspective of what is our mission? And our mission is the veteran. So if the mission is the veteran, then how we do that is sort of secondary to making sure we're taking care of the mission. And I think that's the one thing that we're making, really starting to make some headway in. But believe me, Martha, when you start talking about this, the legacy media, the union bosses, some of the folks in Congress, they don't like it. And so I just simply ask them, if this has been on the list for 10 years, high-risk list, we know the issues going back to the 80s, like you said with your father. My question is, if I'm looking to actually change some stuff to get a system that works better, then what you're actually advocating is for a system of veterans who are trapped in a system that everybody admits probably could be better.
You served in Congress. You probably met with just about every senator for this confirmation process, or at least most of them. You got a very strong vote coming out for this confirmation. I mean, you were one of the few bipartisan votes that happened. And what I find interesting is I got to believe, and I'm not asking you to name names because I know you can't give away private conversations, but I got to believe that as you were going around talking to these senators, that they had the same concerns about waste, fraud, and abuse that you did. It's just when it comes right down to it, they feel like they have to, and this is my words, not yours, that they care more about their caucus than they do their constituents. And so they are aligning with their caucus in attacking you and the VA instead of thinking about their constituents that actually have these problems getting services.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all, Martha, what you said, except, here's the one thing I think that's interesting, though, is they've been, especially those who are being sort of vocal right now, complaining and doing the stuff. The interesting thing for me is that they have trouble admitting that spending, and this number will startle most people, that in the last 4 years, and this will be under the Biden administration, they added $130 billion to the VA budget and added 80,000 employees. $130 billion and added 80,000. So if they were now to come out and say, well, this problem, then they're having to go against themselves. And in this town, nobody likes to admit that they may have taken a wrong path. But we're going to continue to fight with it. But I think it's some of this constituent issue. It's the constituents and unions and others that are driving a narrative here because, again, the VA, and I said this, and I did some social media about this. I said, look, the VA has been a punching bag among veterans and Congress and the media for a long time. Why? And I've said that's over. We're going to start answering and giving solutions instead of just trying to, do the same old line.
Well, I appreciate the videos that you're putting out regularly. I think they're really helpful. Our friend Jerry Peck has met with you about trying to make a Veterans Month, and he's got a petition that has been very successful. Is that on your radar at all?
Yeah, Jerry is wonderful, and I'm so glad. I know he's over 7,000 on his numbers now. I know that's been something the White House has mentioned, a little bit before. Again, for us, what we're focused on is making sure that our veterans feel wanted and that they're needed, and also getting out. So, anything to help, to give our veterans more recognition is something, of course, that I support. And hopefully we can look more with the president, because I know he supports it as well. Supports veterans. Maybe that's a possibility we can look at later on.
And one final question about systems. You would think that anybody would agree that these systems are antiquated because the federal government is the only place that is supposed to have better technology, but also has more people that they're hiring. I mean, did it shock you how bad the systems were?
Yes.
Yes.
I appreciate that question, Martha. It's one of the better questions that's been asked of me on the information side. Yes, ours are terrible. I have a human resources system that cannot tell me where all my employees are. 470,000 employees, I can't give you a good, it would take a lot of work instead of something that should be easily popped up. We've got a health records management system working inside the VA that's over, 30 years old, that takes more almost to upkeep than it does anything else, and yet we've wasted almost 8 years on trying to get a new system in, which, by the way, after 2 weeks, we got it running. to back on track to get more done. But yeah, information, our technology is nowhere where it needs to be.
Doug Collins, VA Secretary, thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Martha. Take care.
Joining me right now is Shabbos Kastenbaum, who I just love. I love when I learn new things about someone I've talked about before, but I'm pulled up his graduate profile from Harvard Divinity School, and it says graduate profile, Shabbos Israel X Kastenbaum. Now, I'm willing to bet, Shabbos, that's not actually your middle name.
It weirdly enough, it actually is.
Oh, I love it.
I actually have 7 names. I have an English name and I have a Hebrew name, which is pretty typical for a modern Orthodox American Jew. So Alexander Israel X Yisrael Kusil Yakir Shabbos Kastenbaum. It's pretty long.
I love it, though. I thought you were like sticking it to him by doing that.
No, although that would have been smart.
Yeah, and I tell you too, I think I love what did you just call yourself, a modern Orthodox Jew? Is that what you called yourself? I think that's great. I love that. So, I appreciate the changes you've had to go through in the last couple of years and how you've done it so publicly where we can all see it. And I don't mean that you're a different person. I think you're probably the same person you were 2 years ago. It's just that things that have happened beginning on October 7th and then the protest, maybe beginning going to a school like Harvard. Then October 7th happens, and then you see before your eyes more than we saw here in the South, because we haven't had that many protests here, and in fact, our college campuses have clamped down on them pretty quickly. But you saw before your eyes people saying from the river to the sea, intifada, calling for, blocking Jews from going into places, Jews having to hide in buildings with people banging on the doors. I mean, the list goes on. And you've done this very public understanding and transformation of kind of what your views have been over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty accurate description of this ideological evolution that I and a significant amount of the American Jewish community has been on. So historically, American Jews vote for the Democratic Party. We're typically fairly liberal. And then after October 7th, as the expression goes, we were mugged by reality. We saw that those that we had allied ourselves with ideologically, those who introduce themselves with their preferred gender pronouns, who take knees for Black Lives Matter, on the night of October 7th, which was the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, when 45 Americans were butchered on live TV by Hamas terrorists, when a dozen Americans were taken hostage, including 5 who are still there, 4 as bodies, 1 as a living hostage, we thought to ourselves, well, this is something so remarkably wrong with the regressive left in this country, and that's where Donald Trump comes into play. That's where the conservative movement comes into play, because many of us are finding a home in this unexpected place. And I'll make this last note. Mahmoud Khalil, who was a Columbia University student who was just detained by ICE. This is someone who's not an American. He's a Syrian national. He organized protests at the university that called for the destruction of the United States, that sent university staff to the hospital, that vandalized private property, that was trespassing. And the Senate Democrats have come out in favor of him, saying free Mahmoud Khalil. Well, I don't recall them saying free Idan Alexander, who's the American teenager still being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. So I think you're seeing an alienation of the Jewish community from the Democratic Party, and it's an alienation that will probably continue.
And to your point, this person who organized the protests at Columbia, the organization of the protests, perfectly fine. You want to say things I don't agree with? Perfectly fine. In fact, the protection of free speech is all about things that might not be popular to say. But where you draw the line, and where you have to draw the line, whether you're talking about January 6th, October 7th, or any other protest that becomes a violent protest, or the protests of the summer of 2020, when you cross the line to vandalizing property, blocking people from their daily lives, endangering people, killing people, wounding people, that's not free speech. That becomes crime.
Exactly. I mean, it is such a disservice that the mainstream media has created this narrative that is so not based in the facts or in the reality. They're trying to create a narrative whereby you can either protect American Jewish students or you can protect the First Amendment and free speech. And nothing is further from the truth. We American Jews do not want to stifle anyone's free speech. We believe in the liberties that this great country has afforded us, that it should be afforded to all Americans. So if someone wants to call for the freeing of Palestine from the river to the sea, for the globalization of the Intifada, if they want to express their moral bankruptcy and their intellectual hypocrisy, you have the freedom to do that. Ironically, it was former Secretary of State John Kerry who once remarked, "You in this country have the freedom to be stupid." So I agree, they have the freedom to express what they would like. What they do not have the freedom to do, as you just quite rightly articulated, is to send university staff members to the hospital, is to vandalize property, is to trespass on private property. And that's exactly what these student groups, many of which are funded by outside foreign funding, many of them have been doing that. Mahmoud Khalil is part of the Columbia University Apartheid Divestment Coalition. He was a lead negotiator. You can go on the Columbia University Apartheid Divestment Coalition Instagram right now, and one of their posts is calling for the eradication of Western civilization. They support armed resistance, and their tactics on the ground are in service of those causes. They violate the law. This is not an issue of free speech. It's an issue of criminality. And I cannot understand for the life of me why my party, the Democratic Party, is going to such great lengths to defend someone who is not an American citizen, who espouses rhetoric that is anti-American and that commits actions that are criminal in nature. I cannot understand why this individual has become a martyr for the left.
Now, you just said my party when you said the Democratic Party. So do you have hope that, because from the leadership of the Democratic Party, I don't think they've learned a single thing from the November election. But what I see when I travel around and talk to Democrats, regular folks that are Democrats, they're in a different place than this so-called leadership is. What are you in a place where you want to help reform the party you were a part of, or are you an independent at this point?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I always joke, well, maybe I just have Stockholm syndrome and I want to stay within the party. Look, I actually had a quick chat with Steve Bannon, ironically, about a month ago, and I presented this problem to him. I said, look, I really feel a sense of alienation from the Democratic Party. I feel more ideologically at home with conservative principles. And it was actually Steve Bannon, of all people, who said, stay with the Democratic Party, reform them from within. Because to be another pro-West, pro-Israel, pro-American Republican, you're one of millions. But to hold those principles in the Democratic Party, you will actually be one of a couple. You will be able to have your voice heard, and you will be able to make the systemic reforms that are so necessary. Because the reality is, integral to a democracy are two opposing parties. We need opposition. We need healthy debate in this country. We cannot simply abide by the fact that only one party is taking a pro-Western sentiment. That is really dangerous for the hundreds of millions of Americans who call this country home. So I'm not willing to abandon the Democratic Party just yet.
Yes.
Although, as Ronald Reagan used to say, I'm not abandoning the Democrats. It seems like the Democrats are abandoning me.
Yeah, and former Senator Zell Miller, former Governor Zell Miller, in a book he wrote about 20 years ago called A National Party No More, he died a Democrat, but he did speak at the 2004 Republican convention, and he said in that book, that is a great book. If you haven't read it, you should. But he said the party didn't leave, the party left him. He didn't leave the party, but that because he came up through the party and all the opportunities he had in politics in his life were through the Democratic Party, that he was going to continue to try to fight to make it better. And, he was a Democratic senator. From his last elected position was as a Democratic senator from Georgia. So, I think that's important. I think that's really important. Now, I was a young Democrat. I worked for Mike Dukakis in 1988, but through that period of time, I was unhappy with the Democratic Party at that time, and I'm a work from within kind of girl too. Okay, and I was 27 years old, so I said the convention's coming to Atlanta. I'm going to work for the convention. I'm going to volunteer for Mike Dukakis. And I got to spend time with Governor Dukakis. I was his wife's driver during the convention. I was in the middle of it. And by the end of that convention, I thought, I don't belong here. That they resent people who are successful. They're not pro-American. I mean, and this was in 1988. And I made the decision to become a Republican. But I fought very hard through my 20s to try to see if I could make change. And I think that we all need to do that. I'm a work from within kind of person. So how are the cases going? How are your cases going right now?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say I was not alive during the Michael Dukakis campaign, yeah. but even I can remember the Willie Horton attack ads against him. So that must have been a pretty difficult summer for you.
It was.
I have good news to report. So Harvard University tried settling with us, and I signed an NDA, so I can't get into the details, but
right.
I essentially said, look, I'm not interested in a slap on the wrist. I'm not interested in letting bygones be bygones. I'm interested in structural reform so that no student, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, black, white, will have to go through the experience that I had to go through. And Harvard was obviously unwilling to make the necessary reforms they needed to do. It's important to remember that although Harvard receives hundreds of millions of dollars from anti-democratic, anti-Western, and anti-American countries like Russia and China and Qatar and Saudi Arabia annually, they still receive close to $1 billion in federal subsidies from the American taxpayer each year. So I told Harvard, I'll see you in court. So we are the first case in American history pertaining to the civil rights violations of Jewish students on a college campus to actually go to trial. And we don't have a date just yet set for trial. The first step will be discovery, then depositions. But I am interested in exposing for and to the American people just how morally bankrupt these institutions of higher learning are. As Virginia Fox, the former chairwoman of the House Committee on Education, would say, these are not elite colleges. These are simply expensive colleges. And whether you love Donald Trump, you hate Donald Trump, the re-election of Donald Trump clearly signified that the American people have repudiated the Ivy League values. They have repudiated the sense of moral bankruptcy and intellectual hypocrisy.
Well, I mean, and how this happens, my oldest cousin got a full scholarship to go to Harvard in the 60s. And we looked at that as a wonderful thing. You know what I mean? As a family. And now we would be like talking if my grandchildren came and said they wanted to go to Harvard, I'd probably try to talk them out of it.
Yeah, I unfortunately would agree with that. And I've heard similar sentiments expressed across the country. Look, again, hate Donald Trump, love Donald Trump, the day after Donald Trump was reelected. So this is Wednesday morning. Forget about the anti-Semitism. Harvard professors canceled classes. Some of them baked lemon squares for their students. They hired Sunshine the Puppet to console students. There was story time with Marty. There was basket weaving. There was massages. I mean, this is an institution of excellence. This is an institution of higher learning. And it's not just the students themselves who are repudiating these values, but it's the private sector. I mean, I speak at a lot of different professional settings. I know a significant amount of CEOs and hedge fund managers through this journey, and so many of them have confided to me, Chavez, we don't want to hire these graduates anymore. We don't want to hire graduates from Columbia and Harvard and Penn and Yale because they're simply ill-equipped to deal with ideas that they disagree with, to think critically about issues. And as I said, it's a damning indictment on the state of higher education that in order for these universities to do the right thing, we have to hold them accountable in a court of law. We have to sue them. I can think of no more pitiful state of our colleges today, and that's why I'm so excited that finally we have leadership in D.C. We have a president of the United States who is telling these universities, you're on notice. We are not simply giving you a carte blanche, a blank check of billions of dollars each year paid for by the American taxpayer. And you are going to continue to see, just like you saw at Columbia University, federal funds being withheld from these elite and expensive colleges. You're going to see their university endowments being taxed. You're going to see, as we just saw a few days ago, foreign students who violated the terms of their visa being deported. And you'll see a crackdown on DEI at public universities. I think these are all excellent steps in the right direction.
Shabbos Kastenbaum, tell us how you can have the best way to follow what's going on with you.
You could follow me on X or Instagram. Just type in my name, Shabbos Kesterman. There aren't too many other Shabboses,
right.
So you'll be able to find me pretty quickly.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, and good luck.
Thank you so much. Take care.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and we're here with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. And Burt, before we first of all, thank you for being here today. I know how busy you are right now. Before we get to the state issues, you're going to have to be the richest man in the world to start undoing the bureaucracy in the United States government, because they're going to come after everything you have when you try to tell the truth about what government is wasting.
Good morning, Martha. It's good to be with you. And you're.
I'm on a tear.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm on a tear on this morning.
No, you should be, because that is the MO of the Democratic Party now. They don't just go after you for your beliefs. They try to destroy you personally, and so. Look, Elon, the scale that they're going after him is on a big scale, a huge scale, quite frankly. But, you see it at the state level too, when you do things that, they don't necessarily agree with. I mean, we were just talking about, I was in a meeting just a few minutes ago, just talking about some of the harassment that some of us are getting on either social media or things of that nature. Martha, I had 3 different, bomb threats during the off season, as far as where they had the what they call I forget, where they make the 911 calls and the swatting. I had 3 different swatting instances myself where they said they were going to bomb my house, or they were holding my family hostage, or whatever else. And so, it's just gotten to be very, very dangerous in some of the politics that is being played in the country right now.
I guess that means you're doing your job, Burt, because several years ago I got a call from the DA because they had taken into custody someone who had killed their in-laws, and when they took this person into custody, she had a list of people she was going after, and I was on that list. So it's unfortunately when you get out there and try to tell the truth, that's what happens to you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But hey, look, I agree with everything that Elon Musk and the Trump administration is doing right now. I mean, there's no question. The federal government is bloated beyond probably even our imagination, and getting in there and digging through it and pointing out these things is not a bad thing at all. And God bless him for wanting to do it.
Well, and you've had a couple of really big events where you were able to go to the White House during the session and related to the Riley Gaines, keeping men out of women's sports, and then, of course, the Lake and Riley Act. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was nice. It was the first time I've been invited back to the White House in 4 years. I was during the first Trump stint. I was up there pretty regularly, and then all of a sudden I wouldn't get any more invitations after the last 4 years, but it was exciting to go up there for the bill signing of the of the Riley Gaines, and then also the Lincoln Riley Act. It was my congressman who introduced that bill, Mike Collins. I was very proud. He's my neighbor, not just my congressman. He's my hometown neighbor there.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. So I was proud of him and what he's already accomplished, and obviously being invited by the president to be there, and had a front row seat for both those events. And look, they were, it was a bittersweet situation with the Lincoln Riley. Obviously, her family was there, and it was a somber moment. But it was a bill that I was glad that they signed into law, and on the other getting boys out of girls sports, that's obviously something. Look, Martha, we actually had that done here in the state 2 years ago.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, our friends over in the House punted the obligation to the Georgia High School Association, which I never thought was right. And now we're coming back 2 years later, and I think we're going to get that move corrected now, and so I'm glad we're going to do that, because there's just no place for boys competing against girls at the high school or collegiate level.
So we got a question in from a listener about Senate Bill 34, which relates to data centers and how they operate. And we talked to Tricia Pride more last week on Crossover Day related to that. But you guys have already passed that bill. Tell us a little bit about that one and what your thoughts are about it.
Well, obviously Georgia has become a really a haven for data centers right now because of the capacity that we have. Georgia Power and our EMCs have done a good job of building out capacity. Obviously, when finishing the Plant Vogtle in the last couple of years has given us that ability. And these data centers, which are, look, this, Facebook, Amazon, these big, Fortune 50 companies. They've got more resources than a lot of countries in the world. But those things are something that will can pay good property tax at the local level. If the locals will allow it, if they quit giving away abatements, they can pay good property taxes, and also they are good. As far as the utilities are concerned, they can produce, give off a good bit of revenue to utilities, which you would hope would offset some of the cost of individuals, and so that's what we're hoping for. But they have become very popular here in the state, and we're welcoming them in. I would just encourage our local development authorities and our local county commissioners that are fortunate enough to get those facilities in their communities. I would suggest to them that they be wise in the abatements that they're giving out, because these companies do not need abatements, I can assure you. But so don't give the farm away, just trying to lure them in, because they could be good partners. And you I think you have to be mindful about how you negotiate with them.
So what do you see as what's left in this session that's on your priority list? Because you guys have done such a great job in the Senate of getting all the big things through, or a lot of the big things through. What are still on your list?
Well, we're just going to be watching what the House did with our priorities. Obviously, we got tort reform passed out of the Senate, which was a big initiative of Governor Kemp's and myself and the Speaker. So we passed that out, several weeks ago now, which we hope will give relief to business owners and individuals, because the cost of insurance is skyrocketing right now, like a lot of other things. But a lot of it has to do with what's going on in our judicial system, our tort system right now, where we've had these runaway, judgments, runaway jury verdicts, and things of that nature that are really helping drive up costs, and it's running off insurance carriers, which gives us less options as consumers when that happens. So we want to see that get done. Obviously, we want to see the Boys and Girls Sport SB1. We want to see that get across the finish line as well. We sent that over to the House a while back. The foster care voucher program that I've been pushing very hard, the school choice for foster families and foster children, as well as trying to keep everybody at bay of wanting to get rid of the school choice program that we passed last year, which hadn't even had a chance to be implemented. And, they're already talking about, taking money away from it and scaling it back. And we hadn't even seen what exactly the benefit of having it will be. So those are some things that I'm paying attention to, and I hope that we're able to do that, as well as we've got tax cut, income tax cut that we're going to be pushing for, as well as doing a tax rebate to consumers, taking $1 billion. Governor Kemp, once again, give him credit for taking another $1 billion of taxpayer money and sending it back to the taxpayer. So those are all things that I think are that are important to the Georgia consumers, the Georgia voters, and that just spitting off the top of my head, those are some of the things I'm just going to be paying attention to.
And I mean, you guys have done a really good job in the Senate, I think, of getting things through. And there's always something that surprises you that pops up that you didn't expect, or at least for me, there is. Is there anything like that that's happened so far this Senate, this seat?
Not yet,
session?
but usually those things don't usually pop up until about day 38 or 39. So there will be some maneuvering, horse trading, shenanigans, whatever you want to call it, that will go on in the final couple of days, but we'll be on the lookout for it. But as far as our priorities, the Senate priorities, our priorities, I feel like are common sense priorities that make sense to the voters, and I think this is something that I ran on 2 years ago, I guess going on 3 years ago now, and they are campaign promises I'm trying to make good on, and also as well as the Senate caucus, which is a very conservative caucus, is also helping me in those efforts.
Burt Jones, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We'll be back down there for Sine Die. We hope to see you on Sine Die, but I know we'll see you soon. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna come on live with you on Sine Die. Don't you worry, Martha. I'm going to change that tradition.
All right, I appreciate it very much. This is Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Have a great day, and thank you for giving us some time today.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, Martha.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.